I now call to order our policing committee meeting, the executive group to order. Approval of the agenda, please.
I'll move.
Second
I
by,
second it. Peter?
any discussion? Ready for the question?
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Are there any conflict of interest for disclosure? No. So move right on now to review the RCMP November 4th presentation. And Don, do you want to lead that discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So my summary of the presentations that happened at the last meeting, there's a lot of detail there and we could get into individual areas. But it seems to me that the quality of reporting, along with the quality of enforcement, is improved over what it was, say, 6 months ago. And in particular, our sergeant seems to be right on the ball. I don't have interaction with him the way that you folks do with respect to specific things. But I hear people saying, like, you got back to them right away and things didn't fall off the end of the table. And, I think that's great. I think we should recognize that. And, I guess I'm curious about what the committee might think. We're on record as having said that we're dissatisfied. And, I think we still have concerns with response times in particular. But there may be an opportunity to express appreciation of the improvement and outline areas that we still think need to be improved. And response times is what I hear from the committee members.
Any comments?
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea too. If they have improved and JF is doing all he can, obviously, to push that along and certainly keep in touch with all of this. So if there is an improvement, we should recognize that fact.
I think there's still an improvement, but I'm still dissatisfied with the level of service. So I don't want to give them things have gotten better, but there is still a lot of problematic issues with the structure of the current model with the RCMP, in my opinion.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, just a comment. I think that based upon what I've heard, that it has improved. There's always room for improvement in anything we are concerned with or working with. But I was at a meeting in Nakwik last Thursday evening. It was a community meeting, and they had Sergeant Martell was there. There were a couple of folks from public safety and whatever. And I think one of the things that was very clear in that meeting is that the roles of the RCMP in public safety aren't really fully understood, maybe not even a little bit understood by the general public. And I think when we look at, it's improved. Is that because, have the RCMP improved and public safety not? I don't know. This is just an observation from that meeting. It was just, so it might not hurt to spend some time on that at some point. Public safety and their role alongside or with the RCMP. And they're like the public safety, for example, they're a 9 to 5, 8 to 6 or whatever organization. They don't work on the weekends and during the night, whereas the RCMP 24/7. And I think people call about an issue, they call the RCMP, it's not their mandate, so they send it over to public safety. Well, public safety, if it's on a Friday, you're not going to see them till Monday. If it's on a Thursday late, you're not likely going to hear anything from them until Friday. If that made any sense, I'll table it. If not, we'll go back and I'll try again.
Well, I do think it makes sense. I have to agree. It's kind of, we've seen a dance between public safety and RCMP in the past. when perhaps they were a little less forthcoming than they are now with respect to the challenges that they face. So, I had to put a fair amount of effort into sort of understanding what those lines were. And I'm paid to do it. So I think you're probably right about the public.
Thank you.
And with
Leo,
that,
did-
I'm
Oh,
sorry, I have to put my, sorry. And with that, Don, I don't know what the next steps are, would be with that. I couldn't even recommend anything.
So I have an idea, and it's something that I had written in the general discussion and direction to staff part of the agenda, and it has to do with reform. And in reform, we're going to be mandated to evolve this committee from a policing committee to a public safety committee, and it's going to have to take on fire and emergency measures as well. So I think that, I'm getting a little out of sequence here, but I think when we look at 2022, the work of this committee will be to prepare the Regional Service Commission to, all of the impacts of reform are supposed to take place January 2023. I think we'll have to start building relationships, assembling what will be a public safety committee rather than just a policing committee. And, public safety obviously be a part of that. It is an opportunity to educate ourselves, to educate the board. And, our public meetings will be online. And so hopefully we can direct folks there to understand the differences, and we can find out what we can do collectively as a commission in terms of trying to clarify that for our communities and support our communities' interaction with their citizens.
thank you. Leo, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I noticed, being in a rural area like we are, and I happen to be in a rural area, and there was an accident, let's say, and the 2 people were injured. The response time was way too slow. I seen the ambulances arrive from Fredericton. I seen fire trucks come, and 20 minutes later, an RCMP officer finally got to the scene after everything was well taken care of. So their presence, their response time is still not adequate, I don't think, for a rural area. And that's the only thing I've noticed. Where we live, of course, we see the RCMP drive through all the time. So, but other places complain that they don't see them at all. And I think they are legitimate complaints. I really do.
So what if we were to raise response times with JH and Mylene, and ask them how they track that, and ask them to tell us in their next presentation, what they consider to be reasonable. So, for example, Leo mentioned an example of 20 minutes. I think on average, Erica would be happy if she could get 20 minutes. And so, we always have to, I think we always have to check and make sure, validate that our expectations are reasonable. And if they're not reasonable from the other side, well, then we need to find some common ground. But we've never really had a discussion with them about how they prioritize or triage calls that come in and make their decisions, and what sort of their operating standards are. And, at our next quarterly meeting, they want to talk about, they would like to talk about, goals and milestones for their next fiscal year, their priorities that we have. Well, obviously, we're going to want to make response times one of those. So we need to know how they count them, and we need to know how we can set appropriate targets. And rather than ambush them, I think that perhaps we could here at the commission reach out to Mylene, the analyst, and say, look, we're going to want to have a discussion about that. And we can do some preparatory work on the staff level for that session.
Mhm. Do you want someone to make a motion on that?
Sure, or you can just direct us to do it.
Okay, fair enough.
I think I saw a lot of heads nod. I think we're being directed to do that.
Yeah.
Yes. Everyone's in
Yeah, I would
agreement
think so.
with that?
Yes.
Yep, good idea.
Yes, yeah. Okay, and before we move on, I'd just like to make a comment about our communication with the RCMP, especially Sergeant JF. At our last meeting, when we get into the roundtable discussion, he gave an update of everyone's concerns from the meeting before that. I was quite impressed with that, very impressed. And I know myself, he'd asked me to send an email with my 3 concerns. I sent it later that night, and the next morning I had an answer from him. So that goes a long ways. Okay, so we'll move on now to review of the November 4th public safety comments. Don, again, would you lead that, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We didn't have a written report from public safety in advance of the meeting, but I made some notes. And Dan Goodwin, his first comment was that Carla Miller, his colleague who's responsible for the contract administration, was on the meeting as well. And I have an idea about that. And she is responsible for pricing. And she can talk about how costs are allocated. And in your package, I did a little summary of what different regions pay and what the increase was for 2022 and what that worked out to per person. And the upside of all of that is that we had the highest increase, driven by the fact that primarily that we had 4 more officers or constables assigned to our region. But at the same time, we also have the lowest per capita cost. And I think it might be a good idea. Carla has offered to come and talk to this committee or the board in general, the larger board, and make a presentation about how those costs are calculated, tier 1 versus tier 2, and it might be helpful. And so if it's the committee's wish, I can reach out, we can reach out to her and look to schedule that.
How would members like to proceed? Would you like presentation done to this committee or to the board as a whole? So we'll go, put your hand up if you'd like it to this committee first. Okay, so Don, everyone's agreed that we'll do it
Right.
with this committee. And then we can always go back to the board and do some explaining.
Sure. The other thing of note, there's a couple things of note that I think that should go in the committee's report to the board that directors would want to know. The first one is that the new legislation with respect to call it cameras that was introduced in, I think, May of this year, and is supposed to take effect in the middle of 2022, will enable law enforcement to rely on cameras in certain conditions. School buses, cameras that'll qualify as evidence, photo radar, red light cameras, and automatic license plate readers. And so this will open up an opportunity for communities to participate in some of the more irritating policing issues that they have. Remember Cambridge Narrows mentioning that there was an incredibly high percentage of vehicles going across the bridge, like in the 90s, where 90% were above the speed limit. So if they had cameras with that, they, people could be charged rather than just the sign that says, you're 73 and the limit is 50 or whatever it happens to be. I know the city of Fredericton, there have been proponents there, red light cameras for a long, long time. But it's opening up 21st century tools to us. And I think we should at least give the directors a heads up that that's coming. And how we plug into that will be something that we want to explore. The other significant thing I thought was 26 investigators, an additional 26 investigators have been assigned on the public safety side to scan their Safer Canadian Communities and Neighborhoods program and their Safer Community unit. So the difference between those two is that scan, it operates on a property kind of thing. So this property is a drug house or a biker headquarters, and they deal with that property. And the Safer Community Unit, SCU, they deal with criminal activities. And so 26 new investigators throughout the province, a fair number of new resources being added to that area, particularly in a time when public safety is having a lot of resources, drawn away to different types of COVID enforcement. So I think that's worthy of mention. I think it's worthy of a more detailed dialogue with Dan about what types of things we report to these people, how we initiate a file, open a file with them. I think we should drill down on that a little more and understand it a little better. And then finally, he talked about education on crime reporting and that they were developing some kind of campaign for crime reporting. The whole thing around, enforcement agencies really rely on reporting, and we all know that the citizens at large are frustrated with reporting crimes, not seeing something happen. And, so they're gonna talk about that. And they're also going to promote Crime Stoppers as a way to do that. And that bridges into our Crime Stoppers rep, who Paul has offered to, do a little presentation on how to make a proper tip. And when I drilled down with him about his little presentation and asked him how much time he needed, he said half-hour minimum. So, and so that's kind of why I deferred it to the next meeting. I think I'd welcome direction from the committee to let Paul know that 15 minutes is kind of all we have because we've got a bunch of other stuff to do. And I think we can marry it up with, and I'll pick the timing. I'll say to him, Paul, look, we really should marry up the timing with the announcement of public safety's communication schedule, which I think we'll be able to get past February, when we will spend a lot of time with the RCMP on our community's priorities. So we'll put it sort of in the May area. And if that's okay with you folks, that's kind of where I'll head.
Everybody's fine with that direction?
Yes.
Works for me.
Yep.
And so I think that's the basis of a report to the board about what has happened, the fundamentals. I think that report should also solicit input from the directors about what their preferred priorities would be for the RCMP, because we're going to sit down in the advisory forum with the advisory forum at the next meeting and have that dialogue. So I think we want to make sure that we provide the directors with an opportunity for input. And then the other, I think the final part of the report should identify the reform requirement and, you know, say that this is going to be the number one sort of work order that the committee looks at during 2022. And, and we'll, you know, that kind of broaches a larger issue. The white paper says that we'll end up with a transition leader to help the board prepare for the new world. And so obviously, and it says that the transition leader will look on new terms of references for committees and what committees that should be in place as a result of reform. And so, you know, we'll be looking at that in a number of areas, not only policing, but I think we should make folks aware of that.
Okay.
Thank you, Don. Does anyone have any questions for Don? Any comments? Okay, thank you, Don. We'll move on. Number 6, comparison of regional policing costs, and that was attached for our information to go down through it and have a look at it. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Don concerning that? And did you have any further comments, Don, that you want to add to that?
Yes, Madam Chair. So I guess a caution in terms of when we look at this, when we try to figure out whether our costs are reasonable or appropriate, there are a whole bunch of ways to look at that. And sometimes there's a whole school of thought that says the proper analysis is what it costs per road kilometer, because that's the geography that the law, the enforcement agency has to deal with. You can break down the cost for basic services and try and factor out any extraordinary items. A murder is very expensive. A situation that we had at the landfill, for example, can end up being very expensive. Over the weekend, we lost at least 3 catalytic converters at the landfill, and the police are down there today. I mean, that's catalytic converters are a thing, and we're certainly seeing that in the Hanwell Industrial Park and throughout the region, obviously. So there's always variables that you can get into a real accounting discussion about whether or not you're looking at the right driver. But there's no question that on average your citizens are paying less than the rest of the province. And you know, that's why I think it would be interesting to have Carla Miller come and talk to us. I wonder why that is. Like, for example, what's the number of constables per population in some of these other regions? I've heard it rumored that the RCMP constables in our province would love to be in the Grand Bay Westfield detachment because it's just not as busy. So I think these are questions worth asking. And because I think that we can't really understand it unless we dig into those drivers. So that's why I included it, you know, because when we look just at Region 11, sometimes we lose perspective. Like Chaleur, $238 per person, or our friends in Charlotte County, $287 per person as compared to our $159. Maybe there's a reason people aren't listening to us about the money that we pay.
Peter, you have your hand up.
Just if I might, Madam Chair, these costs are determined on population and tax base, isn't that not correct?
It's on population, just population. Oh, how it's calculated. Yeah, there's a tax base and population component in as to how it's allocated right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that could be where some of these huge
Anomalies?
huge differences in cost per capita come from.
You very well could be, yeah. Beldoon, for example, has disproportionate property tax base to its population because of the port.
Yeah.
Anything else, Don?
No, that's it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next is the summary of the report to the board.
So I think we kind of covered that in
Yes.
the outline of what I think the pillars should be and what we'll do. And we'll certainly share that with the chair in advance of it going out to the directors as part of the package for December the 7th.
Okay. The February priority setting meeting with the RCMP.
Yeah, so I think we have our direction in terms of the staff work we need to do with the metric of response time. Our priorities have pretty much stayed the same over a long period of time. They're visibility, speeding, youth crime, and drug enforcement. So I don't know that we'll hear something substantially different from the directors when we ask them for those. Always the RCMP are in an interesting position. There are federal priorities that come down for the force, and there are provincial priorities that are discussed with them as part of their contract with the province, and then there's our communities. So if it'll be interesting to see if our priorities are aligned with the provincial and federal ones. I mean, obviously, we're against all crime, but there's an opportunity for us to also find out what the constables in the car, what their marching orders are from their hierarchy as well.
Okay. General discussion and direction to staff. I believe we gave staff direction how we want to proceed during the conversation. So is there anything else? No. So Don, we're clear on the direction.
Yes, we are, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this morning. Stay dry. And I'd like a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Second by
Erica?
meetings adjourned. Thank you. And Don, after it's stopped live streaming, do you have just a minute to chat?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you.